Welcome to the Craftsman Online podcast, the only 5-star rated Masonic podcast endorsed by the Grand Lodge of New York. Any opinions, thoughts, or viewpoints shared during this program are that of the individual and do not reflect the official position of any Grand Lodge, appendant, or concordant body from which that member may hail. I'm your host, Brother Michael Arce, co-founder of CraftsmanOnline.com. You've joined us for our first episode of Season 3, the new year, 2023, as we welcome in Worshipful Brother Nicholas Broadway, publisher of the Square magazine, for our discussion on Co-Freemasonry and the future of the craft. Welcome back, brother.
Welcome, Michael. Great to see you again.
I'm excited to tackle this topic because I think many listeners are aware that Freemasonry, as the oldest male fraternity, has faced a lot of changing times, but times do continue to change. And this whole concept of Co-Freemasonry is nothing new. It dates back to the 1890s. Our friends at the Square magazine wrote not just one, but two great, excellent articles about this that we're going to link into the notes for this podcast. But give us a little historical background on this. How was Co-Freemasonry organized?
It goes back a little bit before the 1890s, almost 100 years, towards sort of the end of the 18th century in France. If the male Freemasonry was an extension to the Enlightenment period, and the lodges were generally populated by the ruling classes and the aristocrats, the ladies of the time were also quite interested in that type of politics, especially the well-connected ladies. And the French Grand Lodge, the Grand Orient de France, they introduced what they call the Masonry, the adoption. Basically, this was allowing wives and daughters, sisters and mistresses of existing Freemasons, and they would do their own, have their own degrees, their own ceremonies. And by all accounts, this was quite an opulent affair. It was people were using sort of masks, and they were dressed up in their refinery and their wigs. It was a really grand affair. I mean, it's very difficult to imagine it now, but you've sort of got to place yourself right back in that late 18th century. It was a big event. Freemasonry is what we practice. It's just grand lodges that have their own rules and regulations. Now, the Co-Freemasonry order, the L'Oreille Domain, as I say, started towards the end of the 19th century. And that's still in existence. It's still quite a strong and probably one of the leading Co-Freemasonry organizations in Europe, and quite popular in America as well. But around about towards the middle of, I think it was about 1994, there was a split, and the Co-Masonry lodges in America split away from the French Grand Lodge, and they created their own Co-Masonry Grand Lodge, and that was known as Universal Co-Masonry, and that was in Colorado. So, though in our pre-chat you were saying that you know very few people and ladies who are Freemasons, it is still quite popular. Not obviously as popular as the male organisations, but it was very popular, and it's still very popular. Universal Co-Masonry, and you have International Co-Masonry, and it was one lodge that split into two Grand Lodges. Also, you've then got other various Grand Lodges around Europe. You've got the Grand Lodge de France, which is a Co-Masonry lodge. All interesting enough as well, they will admit people who are atheists, who don't need a belief in a deity. So it's very modern way of thinking, I guess you might say.
So how does UGL fit into this? Because I'm familiar with the United Grand Lodge of England having some sort of co-Freemasonry, or even just outright female Freemasonry.
So UGLE definitely doesn't have any female Freemasonry. UGLE is the United Grand Lodge of England, and that is purely male only with a belief in a deity. That's the only genre of Freemasons that can be a member of United Grand Lodge of England. In England, we do have female-only lodges. And we have two Grand Lodges that are female only. One is the Order of Women Freemasonry, and the other is the Honourable Fraternity of Ancient Freemasons. Originally, that was one order. They had a disagreement and they split. And the Order of Women Freemasonry grew out of Co-Freemasonry. So it started, if you like, male only. Then there were co-masons. The ladies enjoyed their Freemasonry and decided they didn't want any more men to join. They'd leave the men that had formed the lodge and they could stay. But once they passed, they wouldn't take any further men. And that became a female-only Grand Lodge. Now, the laws are quite clear in Europe, laws, human rights laws, and people are in Europe very precious over, if it's a male organisation, why can't women join? So United Grand Lodge of England is keen to promote the fact that there are lady-only Grand Lodges. There are lady-only lodges. So if you're a lady and you want to join Freemasonry, great. Here's a Grand Lodge. Here's a lodge. Go and join. Enjoy yourself. If they want to join a co-masonry lodge, great. It's Hoyt Domain. It's the International Order. Go and join them. But they have to join a lodge under those Grand Lodges. It's not in England. And what is confusing, I think I know where you might be coming from, the United Grand Lodge of England does welcome the Lady Freemasons to the Masonic building for open days and special events, clearly not Masonic meetings. And there are a number of photographs taken, the Grand Secretary of the United Grand Lodge of England with the Grand Secretary of the Ancient and Fraternal Order of Honourable Freemasons, the Lady Freemasons, and that picture's published. Of course, then people think, United Grand Lodge accepts women. No, it was a publicity shot. It's really to combat this argument that we get where ladies think, if it's a male organisation, why can't I join? I want to become a Freemason. Yeah, you can. You join this lodge. You can't join a lodge under United Grand Lodge of England. And the Lady Freemasons will be only too pleased to accept you or go and join a co-mason.
Gotcha. Well, I think this leads to the next question that a lot of brothers are probably sitting here going is that, all right, so if there is a female version of Freemasonry, how would it be different either in ritual, or is it the same story? Do they share the same principal tenets that would exist in male Freemasonry?
In English Freemasonry, all the ritual is based on what we call emulation ritual, which is the hieroglyphic ritual. And they use emulation ritual books, and they even refer to each other as brothers. The order of women's Freemasonry, the older order, the one that came first, and the larger order, they tend to wear white dresses or smocks, whatever. They dress in white with technically male aprons and gauntlets. And the Honourable Fraternity of Ancient Freemasons, the smaller order, the second order, they tend to wear black. So they wear different type of clothing. Don't get all excited over the initiation. Nothing. You don't see anything at the initiation. In our initiations, we have to lay bare the left breast. They don't do that. But they follow our ritual. They follow the male ritual pretty much, to emulation. The Co-Freemasonry, the Hoyt Domain, they do have their own version of a rite, but it follows pretty much our emulation workings, which is very similar to what you're working.
Well, I remember as a newly actually obligated Mason, the first time I really got to go into lodge rooms, and I noticed that in American lodges, the letter G sits above the master station in the east.
Yeah.
And in my mother lodge, that letter G was a stained glass plate that they would rotate out with depending on whatever other Masonic body was meeting there. So like Royal Arch and, Scottish Rite had their own. But then I noticed one and it was really interesting. I'm like, what is that? And they're like, well, that's the Order of the Eastern Star. Oh, well, that sounds intriguing. What is that? And they explained that it would, and I would explain it as pretty much being the closest thing to Co-Freemasonry that would exist, but yet it's not Co-Freemasonry that I'm aware of, that's accepted by many of the Grand Lodges here in the U.S. with our jurisdictions. It's, I wouldn't say advertised, but it's explained as a co-organization. It's an appendant body of Freemasonry where men and women can be there. Normally, it's the wives or female family members of Freemasons, Master Masons. A Master Mason has to be present for them to open their lodge. But that's about as much as I know about the Order of the Eastern Star, because unfortunately, like a lot of our lodges around the United States, their membership numbers are declining. There's less women that are interested in that. It really has, in my opinion, because it was really kind of organized as something that's a family tradition, for lack of a better term, through the generations, it's become less embraced, unlike the male side of the fraternity, where guys off the street will come up and be like, hey, what's this about? I've heard about this. I want to learn more about the secrets. And you just don't get that. As a matter of fact, I had a colleague at a law firm who was a member of the Order of the Eastern Star. And I recognize that because she actually had her grandmother's ring that she was wearing of being a member. And I was like, wow, like we're a part of almost the same thing. Like that's a really unique connection that just doesn't necessarily exist. So it is interesting to hear that, at least in other jurisdictions or other Grand Lodges that have female versions of Freemasonry, that they try to follow the same story. So there are those similar paths. I would also be interested, because I'm sure it's just like what we share in our lodges when it comes to some of the unfortunate drama, politics, and other pains that come with a business meeting that you would go to with a room full of people that just happen to be the same gender or sex as you.
Also, in the UK, many of the Masonic buildings do host meetings for the ladies' lodges. So both Masonic temples that I visit for my craft meetings, both of those have ladies who meet there as well. In fact, only very recently, they've started having permission to put the photos of their grandmasters in the dining room, and so they use exactly the same equipment. They use the same jewels of the lodge. It's a regular Masonic temple, but it's purely for the ladies only. The Order of the Eastern Star is practiced in Scotland. I'm not sure. I'm not familiar that. Certainly, members of the United Grand Lodge of England would not be able to visit. That's absolutely right. Whether members of the Grand Lodge of Scotland can visit, I'm not sure. I would need to ask whether that was the case. But generally speaking, I would think the answer would be no.
And not to leave any of the other groups out, I have heard of the Order of the Amaranth, the one. I don't know what the correct term is, chapter, group, lodge, court, whatever the term is, that I was exposed to in my home jurisdiction in Schenectady, New York. They literally did not have enough ladies, matrons, to open. So they ended up having to surrender their charter and close that court, which seems, also familiar with that on the male side of the fraternity. And then we have the youth groups that are involved. Everyone knows of the D. Malay, but on the female side, for young ladies, there's Job's Daughters and the Rainbow Girls. And in New York, we have the Triangle organization as well. So there are those youth groups, which all are based on the same teachings and principles of morality that would be exposed in the other degrees.
We have that again in the UK as well. We have the Scouts groups. We have Cubs for both boys and girls. And it's fair to say that a lot of lads who are Scouts go on to be Freemasons. I was a member when I was a lad. I was a member of the Sea Cadets, which is a scouting group, but specifically for an interest in sailing, and it was sponsored by the Royal Navy. The children's, or the young adults groups do lead into Freemasonry.
And what makes me feel good about this conversation is that there was a time when Freemasonry, and I still believe it does, but more, it appealed to families. And there was a time in history when that connection was stronger. And obviously the family and the generations have changed with how folks move and how we live, and society and cultures and traditions have shifted with it. I did have two questions on kind of this issue here. It seems to me like when we talk about the beginning, a lot of this, the history of it goes back to France with kind of the equality movement there. How do you feel that having this female sorority / fraternity, how does that impact, I guess, the outlook or in your opinion, like the reception of Freemasonry with others? Because in my experience, my answer would be it doesn't, because not a lot of people know that this exists.
Again, I think certainly in the UK, United Grand Lodge of England has taken an approach to be very open, and using social media to promote events and websites, and every opportunity is a photo opportunity, and that has really spread into the ladies' organisations as well. So now, when you do go on social media, especially on UK orientated, the algorithms that are picking up UK postings, there is a lot of male and female Freemasonry. Also, I've noticed there's a lot of co-masonry in South America. And I would say co-Freemasonry in South America, going by the social media posts, I would say there's probably almost as active as the male-only fraternities. I haven't seen many female-only organisations posting from South America, but certainly a lot of co-masonry.
On that note, do you feel that the kind of the generational shift where we talk about equality and equity and groups being together, for me, unfortunately, I've never sat in a co-Freemasonry lodge, and I probably can't because of the obligations that I've taken as a Freemason here in the United States, at least in my home jurisdiction. But do you feel that there's a real push to bring the two groups together?
I'm not sure that there will be a change in policy, certainly not on the horizon under the United Grand Lodge of England. I can't see that. But however, I do think, especially in the mainland Europe, if we go into France and Italy, for example, to name the two countries, you have much more of a choice. You can choose, do you want to do a male only? Do you want to do female only? Or do you want to do co-masonry? Do you want a lodge that has a belief in a deity? Or do you want to join a lodge where it's not necessary to have a belief in a deity? So it's almost like a menu. You have a choice. And I think that is a good thing. If a individual that I've interviewed, a few individuals who want to join Freemasonry, but don't have a belief in a deity, but they just, it doesn't connect for them. So I've had to say, I'm really sorry, but our route is not for you. Where it would be really good to say, okay, well, you can't join with us, but you can try this group, and it's strong. And in the future, I think lodges that survive are going to be the lodges that adapt to the changing mood of the times. I think it will be a long time before United Grand Lodge of England can look at the rule book and say, okay, we're going to start accepting ladies into the lodge. I think the numbers will have to dwindle a long way before that happens.
And that's where my point is going to go with this question. Is this a possible solution? And will the declining membership that continues in the male craft side of Freemasonry, will that be enough to push to say, hey, we need to start opening our lodge doors open and be more inclusive?
I'm not sure. I was at a lodge meeting recently, and we were at a festive board, and there was a small group of us on a table, and what had happened was this photograph of the two grand secretary has just been published, And there was a lot of debate on the table about allowing ladies into English lodges. One of the members is a member of a African lodge, East African lodge, and he was under the impression from his user group, WhatsApp group of members, that usually were planning to, this is the way things were moving. And I said, I don't think so. I don't think that's going to happen. And the mood on the table was that some of the members would be quite happy if United Grand Lodge offered co-masonry. And I think what will happen, I honestly don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. But what would happen, excuse me, what would happen, an individual lodge would decide whether it was going to be male only or co-masonry, and then, it would admit people. And the problem is going to be is whether other lodges who are male only would allow ladies to attend the meetings. And this is where the problem begins. If it was to happen today, I think United Grand Lodge would lose more members than gain members.
Yeah, I sadly agree, because it's a lot of the amity game is what we are talking about here. For a listener that's not a Mason, is that a lot of us, as far as a recognition, it's based on what another lodge or a Grand Lodge will agree to and say yes, and they kind of have standards, or we'd say guidelines, that they would follow. And it would take a lot more than I think a local movement, because here in the US, if one of our jurisdictions broke away and said, hey, we're going to allow women and have co-masonry exist in our state, I would be interested to see how many other Grand Lodges would stay in amity with them, just based on other social issues that we've had and continue to have problems with here in the United States.
Yeah, that's right. Also, the other area that you have to look at, which is part of the same coin, we now go through a process. We have gender realignment, and laws were passed again in Europe, which meant that if an individual had a gender transformation and then was legally recognized in this new gender, then how would the lodges handle that situation? Now, we as a Grand Lodge, if a person is born a female and she has a gender transformation and she legally becomes a male, United Grand Lodge is not allowed to refuse her admission on the based on her gender, or the male's gender. And likewise, if a male joins a United Grand Lodge of England lodge and then goes through a gender transformation and legally becomes a female, that person has an option either to stay in a UGLE lodge, but has to conform as a male, or they could optionally resign and join one of the ladies only fraternities. And the agreement is, there is an agreement in principle in place between the Grand Lodges that if somebody who was born a female becomes a male and wants to join UGLE, we would take them at face value, but not reject them on the basis of their gender, and it would work the other way. And I remember when this came into play, because this is part of EU law, where you had to recognise, and you have to be very, very careful. And this was quite a few years ago, and I do know, even in my current district, which is in the suburbs, as you would say, there has been a situation where a lodge has accepted as a joining member a person who was born female, had a gender realignment, became male, legal male, and then left a ladies' lodge and joined a lodge in our area. And that's happened, already.
Right.
So that's something else that that throws in the mix of things.
Right.
For the future, I mean, the thing is to looking at the future. And if we look at the future in a few years' time, 10 years' time, and if we're looking at metaverse masonry, where we're going to be appealing to what we now call, the Gen Zs, the 20-year-olds, I think Freemasonry has. I think we're going to see a lot more females wanting to join, and I do see the Co-Freemasonry fraternities benefiting from that.
10 years into the future, yes, if the interest in Freemasonry continues to come from both sexes or all sexes or just all people, those places that accept that obviously are going to have a better, stronger footing and future for them than the places that are exclusive and do not welcome, all people, let's just say, into a setting. I've often had this conversation with brothers and, someone who's now 45 years old. I would hope in my lifetime that I get to see some of these changes, but I highly doubt it. I think that it would most likely happen in my son's lifetime, and he's not even into his 20s yet. I think that maybe not even in his lifetime that would happen.
The driving force is going to be the decline in numbers. As we've discussed, typically Grand Lodge membership is declining at an alarming rate. And I don't think it'll be an option that they'll make a decision they want to do it. I think it'll be forced upon them. And before we get to that point, I do think that Freemasonry's got to be, Grand Lodges and Freemasonry's got to be a lot clearer on what the value proposition for Freemasonry is. In England, it's very much sold and seen as a social network, which is great. And I mean, there's nothing wrong in that. But of course, it is also a very good learning platform. And I think that's an area that needs to be refocused. So the learning is difficult because today we're taught, like in a university school system, where somebody stands in front of you with the syllabus, tells you about the topics, you scribble notes, you go away and learn, and you do an exam, which is great. Freemasonry is an initiatory process where the whole lot is dumped on you in an allegory, and then by going to meetings and watching it being put to other people, you start to learn it. It's a different way of learning, and we don't learn like that any longer. And of course, people find it very difficult to learn like that. So I think that one of the first steps is we've got to change a little bit on how we teach the learnings of Freemasonry. Yeah, you can still have the initiation process, it can all be dumped on you. But I do think the follow-up has to be adapted to our current style of learning. When we get that sorted, and it becomes much more of personal development. And as I said before, younger people are in greater need now as they ever were in learning self and personal development skills. And there's no reason why females and males don't need the same skill quality. Of course they do. And I think that when we can start to deliver on that, and it's very clear then to girls that the lads are going to lodge and they're learning, they're developing their skill sets, their personal skills, and their self-improvement, then I think that'll attract more ladies to the order. It will be a lot less on dining. Now, I don't know what the state your temples are like, but we've got the same number of temples, but a third of the members that are attending. So the buildings are in absolute decline, and the quality of the food is, it's school dinners. It's not good in the provinces. And I think we're going to see, in parallel to all this, we're going to see a lot of Masonic temples have to fold, which will mean that lodges will go back to renting space in a hotel, which will suddenly mean the dining is going to improve phenomenally because you get a menu, and the hotel is going to be great to have you on a Wednesday night. 30 people turn up on a Wednesday night. That's going to be fantastic for their business. And I think the whole quality will greatly improve, and that will attract people. And I think it will. And the more, as you start getting younger people joining, it becomes less of an old person's club, and then more younger people want to join. We have a scheme in the UK that's run by United Grand Lodge. It's called the University Scheme, and it was focused on the aim at students studying at university, and it allowed 18-year-olds to join, and that was unique at the time. And of course, a lot of young lads do join the organisation, and I can see that the more it becomes a learning platform, not just a social club, that I think will attract more younger people, and that will attract both genders, and that will be another driving force. Because in the end, if you go and you got people keep asking, you got every 3 guys you get a couple of girls and another 3 guys, and you got to keep turning the girls away. You think, hang on a minute, why can't we help set up a ladies only or co? And I can see that happening. I can see it happening, and I can see it being driven.
This is a familiar conversation I've had with brothers when we talk about the future of Freemasonry. Yeah. And it's always this dark, grim picture of like near extinction.
I'm sure.
It reminds me of like the Charles Dickens, like the Ghost of Christmas Future. It's not something pleasant, bright, and shiny. And you did build it up, and you did talk about there would be tremendous benefits to having all people, just Freemasonry welcoming everyone. It doesn't matter. Just come into our lodges and share the beautiful principles of what we're all about. And I know in your heart, like, that's it. But the realistic thing is, we are also a male organization that holds on to steadfast traditions that don't allow for this.
Freemasonry doesn't care whether you're male or female. Grand lodges do.
True. It'd be out of desperation. And we should be welcoming them for bringing their own unique ideas and perspective and just their genuine sweet spirits into the craft. Maybe that's just me saying it, but that's the part of it where I feel at that point it could just be too late for all involved, honestly.
No, I don't think it's. I don't think it's too late. Because again, I think there is a need. There's more of a need now, or as much of a need now for Freemason than there ever was, because more young people now want to learn personal development skills, leadership skills. They want to have self-improvement, and they need a place to practice it. And Lodge provides a place to practice that, and they need a place to learn that. And Freemasonry offers that, but not all Grand Lodges provide the facility for females to participate. And what will happen is young up-and-coming Grand Lodges who are more open-minded will start taking the members. Now, as we shift from real-world Freemasonry into metaverse Freemasonry, this is an opportunity where you can say, right, well, okay, we're going to have 6 flavors of Freemasonry. We're going to have male only, female only, and co-masonry. One group must have a belief in a deity, and the other group, it's not necessary to have a belief in a deity. That's 6 flavors, if you like. It won't even come to that, but there are 6 flavors. And the lodges that provide the best user experience for their members will be the ones that thrive. And it's as simple as that.
Right. At that point, as we're talking in the future, this is probably more than 10 years down the road, maybe like 15, 20, when the metaverse is really a reality that we're all spending a lot of part of our time in.
And 20 years is no time. 20 years is no time, is it?
It's just a generation. But yeah, no, I agree with you. It's not a massive amount, because I always forget that, 2020 or 2000 when I'm like, oh my gosh, that was 23 years ago. I am an old man. But to your point, I think, 20 years down the road, when the metaverse is more prominent, more established, more a part of the fabric of our life, with the telecommunication that is already happening now, I'm having a conversation with you at my house in Northern Virginia, and you are in a suburb in wonderful England somewhere. That being a part of something that is local, the idea of what is local or near me won't matter anymore. And I think the idea of having that global exchange of being like, hey, I'm part of a group that really is this global organization, and it's worldly. And I get to hear voices from so many different people. That will be very attractive than this dirty, decrepit, dying lodge room that's just serving cold green beans on a plate and, barely has enough men to open and close a meeting. Going to be a very easy sale.
This week, I had a Zoom meeting with some brethren who are building metaverse. The metaverse software architects, so they're building the metaverse buildings, and they're based in Portugal in Europe. And but they, unfortunately for me, they are members of a non-recognised Grand Lodge. It's not recognised by United Grand Lodge of England, so I can't meet them in an open lodge. But I talk with them on Zoom, and I would love to be able to have the opportunity to go and meet with them in a lodge. But I can't do it, which is crazy. And they have the same. They have the same set of rules that male and women believe in identity. Yeah. So we follow the same rules. But because Grand Lodge doesn't recognise that one, it recognises the other one. We can't meet. And also, I have a lot of conversations with the guys that I make good contacts with, brothers in Croatia. And again, because they are members of a non-recognised Grand Lodge from the United Grand Lodge of England, I can meet with them, I can have a beer with them, but I can't meet in an open lodge, which is frustrating and crazy. So those kind of things are going to hit. They're going to be the barriers, and eventually, myself, I might get to the point where I think, well, hang on a minute, I'd rather go and meet these people. Meeting these people and going off, and having fun with those guys is more important than being a member of the United Grand Lodge of England. I'll just join an independent Grand Lodge because it allows me to do that. I don't have that restraint. And I think once we can dial up, as I say, we'll be dialing up all around the world and going to lodge meetings and watching different rituals and being part of it. And I don't think gender will even be an issue. 100 years' time, most people have forgotten about the gender issue altogether.
This has been another great Craftsman Online podcast episode with my guest this week. He's the publisher of the Square magazine. Thank you so much, Worshipful Nicholas Broadway, for coming back on.
It's been great talking to you again, Michael. I look forward to this year.
I know, I'm still getting used to that too. And I'm also looking forward to our conversation next month. If you're looking for more Masonic education, you can find it at the Square magazine. That's thesquaremagazine.com. If you've enjoyed this episode, you want to hear some more, you can just tell Siri or Alexa to play the Craftsman Online podcast. We're available on all streaming platforms with new episodes every Monday morning. And just one more quick ask, it would mean a lot to us, doesn't take a whole bunch of time, but wherever you are listening to us, if you've enjoyed us, give us a thumbs up, a happy star review. Just a few seconds from you means a whole bunch to us. Until next time, let peace and harmony prevail.